Hi, Dr. Yass here. In this episode, I want to try to give you a sense of what the structural variations that are being identified on MRIs are like so that you could get a sense of the severity of the nature of these structural variations to try to get a feel of how important it is to seek care or whether care is even needed. The typical thing that's happening out there is that you're having pain somewhere in your body. And again, we always talk about the gold standard of diagnosing being the MRI. So you get the MRI and it finds things like in the spine stenosis or spondylolisthesis or spondylosis, compression fractures, impingement of nerve roots on in the arm or the joints, peripheral joints. You'll get arthritic changes or labral tears or meniscal tears. And clearly, the way that the information is provided is not in layperson terms. That would be too simple. There seems to have to be the need to utilize medical descriptions, which sound very complex. For instance, spondylolisthesis, just the word itself would scare the individual. And yet, what it just means is the fact that vertebrae, instead of being stabilized one on top of the other with the ligaments that surround the spinal column, there's been some level of laxity to where a vertebrae can shift a little bit forward to back. But that doesn't even mean that that situation will even lead to a symptom. You may have that for 50, 60 years, never knowing it and die with it. So the identification of it is nothing to worry about. It's nothing to become concerned about, frantic about, anxious about, unless you could associate specific symptoms that would be occurring if, in fact, something like that were occur. Now, if we talk about spondylolisthesis as having some significant symptom, since we're talking about the vertebral column being unstable, well, certainly if it were to become unstable enough and begin to impact the spinal cord, well, I'd expect you to be starting to tell me that you're having problems with urinating or going to the bathroom, maybe the entire level of both legs becoming numb, pain in your knee, pain in your shoulder, sciatic symptom. None of that raises to the level of a symptom that would be associated with something like spondylolisthesis. So the identification of these structural variations has to be tampered. You have to recognize that these structural variations exist in as many people without pain to as many people with pain, as many people who are 5 foot to as many people who are 6 foot, to as many people who have blonde hair to as many people who have brown hair. The structural variations are due to wear and tear, primarily because the average person does not know how to sustain strength and balance of their musculature to maintain the optimal position of joint surfaces, whether the spine or peripheral joint, so that the joints are able to absorb the forces that run through the body in creating activity, which limits the chance of wearing and tearing of the joint surfaces and the joints. So this is a big one. This is huge. If I said to the average person, are the structural variations identified more like cancer or more like wrinkles, which would they be? I would guarantee you that pretty much 1,000 out of 1,000 people would say they're more like cancer. That the mere identification of the structural variation, God forbid you get an MRI and the guy or woman comes out and says, you have a herniated disc, you have a bulging disc, you have arthritis, you have a pinched nerve, you believe, and you have been coerced. Trust me, it's a coercion. It's a manipulation of your thought process to think that the mere identification requires some sort of intervention. Oh my God, I have a herniated disc. It needs to be cared for. Utter, utter, utter bullshit. Utter bullshit. That structural variation has been there long before you had your symptoms and will be there long after you have the symptoms if you get the Yass method to address your symptoms, and it will show that in more than 98% of cases, the symptoms you're experiencing are muscular. So upon completion of your treatment, when you're pain-free and fully functional, if we were to get an MRI after the fact, the same structural variations would be there. Who gives a shit? You have to begin to believe and trust. It's empirical. It's irrefutable that those structural variations are more like wrinkles. Wrinkles. Nobody's running out and getting a skin graft every time they have a wrinkle. But it's a structural variation. Certainly, it must be addressed. How come everyone isn't chomping at the bit to get a skin graft every time they get a wrinkle? Because the general population's belief is that the wrinkle, although a structural variation to the skin, there's no doubt the skin has changed. It doesn't look the same with the wrinkle, but you recognize that the integrity of the skin is still intact. What's the purpose of skin? Why do you have skin? Its purpose is to prevent antigens from entering the body. Well, is that job altered because now where your smooth skin was, now there's a wrinkle? Of course not. The integrity is still the same. So can you have a structural variation, an abnormality, and yet the integrity of the tissue remain intact? Yes, I just proved it to you. So why do you think that the structural variations identified on MRIs in the spine or the peripheral joint are any different? Why do you think the integrity of the structure has been destroyed? It's not functioning. That's why I'm having my symptom. Because that's what you're being told. That's it. No evidence, no proof. You went to somebody who only knows that structural variations identified are what they fix for a living. And so they'll say anything. Anything. Oh, your hair on fire? Yes, yes. You see the pinched nerve? Yes, yes. Connection. Sure, why not? Your button's undone? Oh, did you see the stenosis at your the meniscal tear in your knee? Yes, yes, the button undone from the knee, the meniscus. Yes, the meniscus, the meniscus. You see, it doesn't look the way it used to. It needs surgery. You got to get to this point. Your only hope for protecting yourself is to recognize, and I am telling you, this is crystal clear. The structural variations identified on MRIs are exactly like wrinkles and nothing like cancer. That's the big picture. That's the big picture. If you're willing to accept that, then you're going to finally be willing to snap out of the idea that just because the structural variations identified, it must be the cause of the symptoms, and I have to get rid of the symptoms, and I have to get rid of the evil meniscal tear and pinched nerve, and therefore I've got to get an intervention. It's pure crap. Let me just really reach this understanding with you. A study shows over the age of 60, 60 years and older, people who do not have back pain, no back pain, 93% are found to have degenerative disc disease. 93% have degenerative disc disease. So the next time you have pain somewhere in your body and somebody says the cause is degenerative disc disease, explain to me how that's possible. If 93% of people without pain have degenerative disc disease, isn't it possible that the person that has the pain from another tissue and the degenerative disc disease just exists? Isn't that the obvious answer? You gotta break out, man. You gotta come to the realization you have been manipulated. You have been coerced. It's 40 years. 40 years of this pushing, MRI, MRI, MRI. Bad structure, needs to be treated, just like cancer. All crap, meaningless. The empirical evidence is so freaking overwhelming, it's 100% obvious without question. I'm here to tell you that's the fact. Your one chance of ever seeing yourself be pain-free and fully functional is breaking out of the pack, not being part of an institutional misrepresentation that structural variations are like cancer, not wrinkles. It's just pure nonsense. If this rings true to you and you want to speak about it at another point or some point in the future and see if you're on the right direction and maybe you're looking to get a legitimate diagnosis through a physical evaluation that you could achieve through a Yass method Zoom session, you could email me. Email me at drmitch@mitchellyass.com. I'll have the information in the description. If you're tired of the existing system and you're looking for something new and you want a Yass method Zoom session, you could do that by going on my website, livewithoutpains.com/sessions, and schedule a Zoom session for the day and time that's most comfortable for you. This is your chance to finally recognize that everything you've been told is just a complete misrepresentation, a complete coercion of your emotion. The incitement to fear is what the purpose is. If I can convince you that the structural variation is like cancer, shit, man, what alternative do you have but to have it cut out? Well, that's just crap. No representation. Nothing indicates that. It is exactly like a wrinkle. And as soon as you get that point, you could walk away from that mindset and start thinking about, well, if it's not that, what is it? And I have shown that in more than 98% of cases, the cause is muscular. And I can prove that to you right on your first Yass Method Zoom session. Okay? So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like my YouTube channel, Dr. Mitchell Yass, please subscribe to get notifications when new videos like this are added or when I'm live on YouTube. I'm putting this information out there to try to help you. You need to get the right information, logically based, analytically based, empirically based information. That's what's real. That's what's real. All right. For now, Dr. Mitchell Yass, wishing you a pain-free, fully functional life. Bye-bye for now.